and welcome to the Darkside. We are very excited to be with you this evening. We have just been giggling at that great Channel 4 program from two young ladies who decided to talk about open marriages or open relationships. It was hilarious. It was hilarious. It was really funny. I really enjoyed it. But today, that's not what we're talking about. If, however, you would like us to talk about relationships and the different types and do open relationships work, we'd be quite happy to do that subject. Oh my gosh, you guys need to see the clip. That's all I can say. It is hilarious. Right, so news for today. As always, we get our news, but first, before I break into the real news, I just had to share a story that really had me giggling. So some of you will have seen that M&M's have launched some new characters. They're updating their characters and bringing them into the 21st century, and they had this whole thing. Anyway, listen, I saw this on the Daily Show. And Trevor Noah did a brilliant piece on it. Go there and watch it. This is not what this is about. This is about the laughing hilarity of Tucker Carlson on Fox News. Tucker Carlson loses his mind. I've only seen a clip of it. He gets so mad because he says they've modernized the characters and now the brown M&M doesn't have the sexy heels and she doesn't have the sexy appeal. And what is it that these people want from us? They're not going to be happy until they've taken away and all of the sex appeal from the cartoon chocolate, and they'll be androgynous and unattractive, and then where will we be?
Okay.
It's so hilarious how you get so mad about the brown M&M not wearing stiletto heels but wearing more practical shoes. It really upset. I'm so sorry. You should really watch the clip. It's really funny.
Look, listen, Tucker Carlson got issues. That's all I'm going to say. And look, the man's got enough money. He don't need to be alone in his room by himself finding animated advertising characters sexy. But I mean, for all the racism that comes out of his mouth, it's quite funny that he finds the one color sexy. So I want to know what woman of color hurt him in his past. Right? That's the only thing I can come up with.
Conservative women, you need to do better. Clearly,
the man has a fetish. That's all I'm going to say.
So funny. Y'all need to check it out. It's great. It's on Twitter. They're memeing it out. It's hilarious. And it's him saying it. It is really hilarious. Sorry. So thank you for joining the Dark Side, where we giggle as well as show you the darker things of life. Yes, Shireen tells us it's true. It is so ridiculous. But I mean, we could do a whole piece on the fact that they're changing a chocolate to make it less sexy, and we need to talk about the way that we use women's bodies in chocolate form to sell products. But Tucker Carlson losing his mind is probably the reason why they still use women's bodies in order to sell products.
Listen, all I know is listen, this is actually a scary thought, but now I know what Tucker Carlson watches late at night, and that's disturbing, right? That's all I'm saying.
I'm sorry. If you have never joined us before, we're not so normally so giggly, but it's just too funny for words. Okay, let's go on with the news for today. Today's episode is about forgiveness, so most of the stories I focused on this week actually happen to coincide with this. So the first story that I want to do is from the Dutch news story. Just came out today and is actually going to be enacted tomorrow. And basically, police did a siege on a drug ring. And when they seized their telephones, they found the volume of messages they found and the types of messaging they were finding was so disturbing that they decided to take a different approach. So people were messaging, begging for credit because they'd run out of money. People were messaging, begging them to not supply drugs to their loved ones. Parents were saying, please bring them only when my kids are not home. I never want my kids to see this. And so what they have decided to do is something that they have done before in the past. So what they're going to do is tomorrow they're going to send out 3,000 a text message to 3,500 drug users, not to catch them and arrest them. I know you Americans thought that's what was going to happen, not to do that, but to encourage them to get help. So they're going to direct them to this website, which actually pushes them towards health services and different organizations to help them to break the cycle of drug abuse and drug addiction. This has been done before. So this particular case is going to happen in Nijmegen tomorrow. So if you know anyone in Nijmegen, and they're on drugs, they will get this text message more than likely. But this happened in Zwolle last year. So in Zwolle, which is right in the north of the country, they sent out 750 text messages to 750 individual users, and it drove the traffic of the website up. They got 3,000 unique hits off of this 750 messages. So they can't tell how many people actually came off drugs, but obviously the fact that all of, so many people then started looking for help is a positive sign. I love this story because it is in such contrast to if you're an English speaker, the amount of messaging you get from the US, from the UK, and from other places that drug users are to be locked up effectively, and that's the only use. Like, I literally, when I saw 3,500 drug users are going to get this message, I saw 3,500 people the American system isn't locking up. Because that's the reality, the hard reality of living in somewhere like the USA, where being a user, being an addict is something that will get you convicted. Generally, of course, more if you're Black than any other race, but it is also criminalized in other races. It's good to point out. And I think this idea that you're not penalizing someone for their addiction, you're trying to get them to break the cycle. And look at if they can be redeemed, if there's a redemptive element, if you can, take them out of that system and give them that kind of, we're looking at forgiveness versus second chances and that aspect today. And this is really about that second chance. Can you get somebody who's gone down a path that is not good for them or their family, because these are often messages that have been going between families as well, out of this cycle of addiction and criminal activity?
Well, I think it's part of the larger conversation about this failed war on drugs, which the USA initiated and began, and due to its global influence and power, has coerced many other nations into becoming a part of. And it's a failed war.
Yeah.
That has real world consequences. And I think if you just look at how Portugal has treated its drug problem in
Yeah.
comparison, you see that Portugal in this aspect and area is doing so much better
Yeah.
than any other nation that is dealing with a drug epidemic. So I think that's perhaps part of a broader conversation, and perhaps I don't know if the Netherlands is moving towards adopting some aspects of the Portuguese model in recognition that it has failed. And actually, the cost financially and socially in participating and continuing to participate in this war on drugs is just not worth it.
Yeah, I mean, the Dutch have a really strange kind of legal system when it comes to drugs, particularly what you would call soft drugs like weed and so on and so forth. So a lot of people may know that in the Netherlands, they may have visited the Netherlands with a specific purpose to go to Amsterdam and smoke pot or something like that, or they cross the borders from Germany and from Belgium to do likewise. And what it is, and what people kind of mistake, is that, you know, drugs are allowed in the Netherlands. Well, actually, there's this like loophole system. I wish I had one of my lawyer friends on now who can explain it a little bit better than me. But there's this loophole. It's still illegal to have drugs here. It's just that they have like a loophole in which it's able for a certain.
It's a turn a blind eye policy
Yeah.
towards the softer drugs. And I think it's actually worth mentioning. I believe it was Khan, Lord Mayor of London, who has recently spoken about decriminalizing possession of weed for personal use and not seeking to pursue um, prosecutions in that area within London. It was just in the past week or two. I think he said that was going to be the policy moving forward.
The same is true of there's certain states that have the same policy where they've no longer.
Right. Now, here's the thing, though, that I want to bring up actually is that now that countries are moving towards these policies, and considering the historical policy of this war on drugs was actually based in race. You can go check it out now. It's all there. Government officials
we
have
can do that Darkside for you if you really want.
already confessed to this. And now that so many wealthy white people are now making money off of it, are we going to go back and look at the historical injustices, the systemic injustices that have happened? And are we going to talk about compensation, not just for individuals, but for communities that have been destroyed, and how we are going to systemically support them and systematically support them moving forward?
Wow. I don't have anything else to add to that other than to say, if you want us to do a Darkside on the war on drugs, please do let us know in the comment section, because what he said there is just a whole thing. Yeah, so that was in Dutch news today, and I think it does feed into the broader conversation. But I do just like this redemptive element where, instead of trying to chase down those 3,500 and push them through the justice system to arrest them all and what have you, what you're actually doing is trying to push them through a system to get them clean and back into regular society in a way that isn't part of the criminal world, so to speak. So I think that's a great move. I applaud it. Well done, the Netherlands, kind of thing. All right, so the next news story that we have is lasted a week and a half or so, but it's really lasted the entire term of Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson has been all over the news for the last week in various ways, either apologising or not apologising, or pretending to apologise or fake apologising, depending on which one you caught. Because Number 10, which is the White House equivalent in the UK, so Number 10, the residence of the Prime Minister, was basically having full-out parties for the duration of lockdown. And these parties ranged from bring your own alcohol to leaving parties to well done, pat yourself on the back. Someone even, it was quite funny because they tried to bring Keir Starmer in with the whole "you've been partying too," and there's a picture of Keir Starmer and they're eating some food, and he was like, yes, we had been working and we ordered takeout and ate it. That's the extent of the party. We did not have a bring your own wine extravaganza, which apparently Mr. Johnson believes is a work event. I've got to say that clearly some of us have been working in the wrong industry when work events are bring your own wine to the garden at 11 o'clock at night on a Friday, and celebrate and do whatever and get drunk and have play games. Anyway, needless to say, this man has come on with some kind of fake apology and then made excuses and then did the best move he could have possibly done. He took away all the measures in England to bribe the English part of the population to forget that he was raving during the entire duration of their lockdown. And someone said, and then there was one party which was really poignant because it was the night before the funeral of Prince Philip, where the Queen sat alone because of COVID restrictions imposed by her Prime Minister, who she allows to be in government. She sat alone while they buried her husband. much like much of the country was experiencing at that time. And whether you like the Queen or not is immaterial to the fact that all of these restrictions were happening, and even the Queen upheld the restrictions. But somehow the Prime Minister believes that having all the work staff in the garden with their own wine, and having a party and singing songs and playing games is apparently not a party, it's a work event. So he's asking for forgiveness again, or something like that. He's at least said sorry, or something like that.
Look, it's Boris, yeah? I mean, look, the reality is it's easy to become desensitized to the buffoon that Boris Johnson is, but I think people misunderstand how dangerous he is. Because he's not an imbecile.
No,
And I think,
it's strategic.
and I think people need to understand this.
Yeah.
He puts on the pretense of being, well, yeah, dense.
But did he graduate Oxford?
Well, we don't know. Look, let's just say, you know, when it comes to people within a certain class, graduation and brown envelopes sometimes go well together. But the point is, whether he graduated or not.
Allegedly, don't come for us, Oxford. It was allegedly. Okay, go ahead.
Anyway, he's not an imbecile, so he knows exactly what he's doing. And I think people need to understand he is dangerous. This man is dangerous.
Yeah.
Because he has naked political ambitions. He has naked ambitions for power and will do whatever it takes to not only get that power but to hold on to that power.
Yeah.
And so now he has just said, look, I am in danger of losing my power.
Mhm.
What can I do? What red meat can I throw out to a certain segment of people that will be vocal enough to keep me in power? And he doesn't care what group that is.
Yeah.
Right? That is the reality of it. And so he has said, look, fine. The anti-vaccine people are probably the most vocal group in the UK right now.
Mhm.
Let me pander to these people. Doesn't matter how many thousands of people will die or extra people will die as a result,
Mhm.
but this will help keep me in power.
Yeah.
And so he's been like, yeah, you know what? I don't care that a few grannies are going to die.
Well, he said that from the very beginning on his first press conference for Corona. Some of your grannies are going to die. We'll warn. We'll move on. It'll be okay. Yeah, I think for me, it's the danger aspect of it, as you say, is the real problem. He's at a time when Britain was recording like 75,000 cases of Corona being announced per day, etc. Like they were recording some of the highest numbers across the world, in fact, of Corona in a day. Where the hospitals were pleading, please, we are really beginning to buckle under the winter pressure, because not only are we having Corona cases come in, but we're also having flu and winter and elderly people and all of the usual things that happen when a country like Britain gets cold. And our numbers are getting to the point where we're not coping. We're trying to catch up, as you instructed, with the backlog of course, operations and testing and all of that surrounding people's general health. And so you're throwing our National Health Service under the bus by saying, we'll just lift all the measures because I really don't want you to talk about the fact that I basically don't care about you. And I'm going to do what I want to do, regardless of whether you think, isn't it reasonable that I would not know what it is could get out of power for this? And so instead of losing my power, what I'm going to do is throw you fully 100% you people under the bus. And to me, it's just really quite scary that of course, the news cycles, you see it happening and they buy into it and no one challenges it and they don't question it. And you just think, oh,
The UK has the highest excess death rate in the whole of Europe.
there you go. Well, with Boris Johnson having parties at number 10, that's not surprised. He's setting the worst example and then lifting all the restrictions at times when he shouldn't. Anyway, I will leave that news story there because we have other news story from the Conservative Party, the party that just keeps giving us stories every week. The Conservative
Party that makes the party.
Indeed. The Conservative Party in the UK. The news story broke over the weekend of a Conservative member or ex-minister for transport, Nusrat Ghani. She was the Minister for Transport during 2018 to 2020. She lost her job in a mini reshuffle in 2020. And when she asked the reason for losing her job, because she thought she was doing her job very well, she was told that it was her Muslimness, specifically being a female Muslim, was making people uncomfortable. So being a woman and a Muslim was making people uncomfortable, and therefore this was the issue really as to why she had to go. So according to her information, you sound like you want to jump in.
Well, I was going to say it's a bit more to it than that, and that is that in wake of the allegations of Islamophobia,
yeah,
she was accused of not doing enough to protect the party.
Right.
So there was the Tory party. It's like the police in the USA. The Tory party investigated themselves and found no evidence of wrongdoing. So there was a investigation review into the Tories around the middle of 2021 and about Islamophobia within the Conservative Party. And they basically just whitewashed themselves. Some of the Muslims within the party said, look, this report is whitewash. Lady Worsey, she sits in the House of Lords and is a Tory. She, I believe, was the one who called for the report. She said that there were issues within the party of Islamophobia from the top to the bottom. And basically the report came out. It whitewashed everything. And so Gaudi was told, look, you didn't do enough to protect us when these allegations came out, when the report came out, you just didn't do enough.
Yeah, and so she apparently during this time when she was being reshuffled and told that as a woman and a Muslim that's what's making people uncomfortable, but you know that wouldn't be surprising because it was her leader in her party that said that Muslim women look like pillar boxes. So not surprising that would make him uncomfortable, not to mention others. But she's, according to her, she has pursued all of her options. She tried to pursue and follow all of the guidelines and was basically met with a, we don't know what you're talking about. And so she put out in a series of tweets the story without naming names. So she said a senior whip, and she didn't name which one. There are multiple, so it's not, it's not obvious. If you're not in the party, it might not be obvious who it is. Maybe if you're in the party, you might know, but not being in the party, you might not know this. So of course, she just put down a series of tweets that said that this particular senior whip told her this, and this is what happened, and this is why she no longer works as the transport minister. So what was quite interesting is that Mark Spencer decided that he would read those tweets and he thought, I think she's talking about me, but I wouldn't have said those things. And so in some way, in Mark Spencer's mind, he thought, she must be talking about me when she said what she said. But the way I should come out and speak about this is to say it was me and then deny that I said it. So there's this kind of real weird loop going on because there's more than one whip. She of herself says that she took this through various channels and would have had to speak to more than one whip. So it's not clear who the whip was that she was talking to in the first instance, but that she spoke to multiple people. So how would you, Mr. Spencer, conclude that it was you if it wasn't you that said it? I mean, it seems really odd that you would go, yep, she spoke to me. I was the one that she spoke to. It's definitely me that she's talking about. But I mean, I didn't say that, but she's definitely talking about me. Just why would you do this? But it really, to me, speaks to, I think, the arrogance of his whiteness, his white male position, that you would actually think to come out and say, oh, that's definitely me she's talking about. Oh, but I didn't say that, but definitely me she's talking about. Well, how would you know that's you? She didn't name anyone. She didn't call names. She didn't give a date and an office number that she went to, so we know it was you. So how would you know it's, unless you said it, it wouldn't be you. If you didn't say it, then she's talking about someone else.
Well, I think what
What he did was
he's saying is that he's the person she spoke to, or he believes that
he's the
he's the
person.
person that she spoke to, but he never said it. Well, here's the thing. What you're saying is, well, somebody could believe I said this, but it also opens up another possibility. It's possible to believe that you would have said it, but that somebody else actually said it, because she hasn't said who it is. So it could easily be somebody else.
It could be you or someone else, or it's possible that people around you know how racist and Islamophobic you are and know that that's the kind of thing you said and would have thrown you out under the bus. I mean, there's so many ways this could have gone. I then had a quick look because there are a number of Asian high profile politicians that they have at the moment. There are 2 that are Hindu and 1 that is a non-practicing Muslim. And I found it quite interesting just simply because it was the collision for me of her womanness and her religion. So it was the whole collision of all of those things that came together. And I think I found it quite interesting that that's what they picked on. Like, her as a female Muslim is what's causing everyone else to be uncomfortable. Now, to what I could see, she's not wearing a niqab. She doesn't do that, which people might say that's what causes the discomfort, which I think is unreasonable. Don't hear me agree with that. So I couldn't, the fact that you are literally saying, as a woman and a Muslim, we all find you a bit uncomfortable because being a woman and a Muslim is that, like, what exactly is, so I can understand why there needed to be a report. I can understand why the report was whitewashed, and I can also understand why there are now Tory members who are leaving the party and joining the opposition, or are outing the party for and speaking out so vocally more and more about this, because it's actually really just so insidious. I mean, it's always been quite, I'm always surprised that there are any people of color within the Conservative Party. I find that quite astounding, just because as I grew up, this was not the party for us. We knew this from the beginning. It amazes me that anyone else thought anything different. But okay, you joined the party believing in their principles. I can't figure out what those principles are, to be honest, that you believe in, but go ahead. That's your choice. But to think that you're not going to meet with racism, prejudice, Islamophobia, sexism, etc., is quite shocking. Like, it goes hand in hand. And the fact that those people who are in the party, who are brown and who are women, are not literally fighting tooth and nail to get rid of it, is just like, really, like it beggars belief. It beggars belief.
I think we need to be realistic. This is who the Tory party is.
That's what I'm saying.
I've already said on this program more than once about the historical campaign. If you want to go for a neighbor, vote Labour. But we also have to talk about the fact that the current Prime Minister and leader of the Tory party referred to Muslim women as bank robbers and letterboxes.
Right.
Right? So you have the Islamophobia there. And I think also there's a pointed message that he sent out. When this report was released, it was either days or maybe a week, 2 weeks later. Boris Johnson was hosting Viktor Orban at 10 Downing Street. Now, Viktor Orban is a Hungarian prime minister who has
Oh,
previously described Muslims as invaders, right? And so you have to look at the political messages that are being sent in all of this.
yeah.
So,
I mean, Dominic Raab is doing his usual rounds talking about there is no case to be answered, you know, and it proves her point to a certain degree, which is that she pursued this internally through the avenues that were available to her. And the answer was nothing happened. And then she says it again in a public forum, and the answer is there's no case to be answered. Nothing happened. So you will have somebody saying this over, they're a paid up, signed up member of your party, and you just go, we don't know. We're sending the message very vocally, I think, that basically we don't care. We're not interested. We only want your votes and your money, and we do not care about you as individuals, people, or as a group. We have no interest in even pretending to be somewhat respectful. I mean, on a basic human level, respectful of the fact that you are human and that you are British and that you have this. No, we're just not even going to bother with that. So I think for the Conservative Party, again, the questions need to be asked of the current leadership, but need to be asked of the British people. Who are you voting for? What exactly are you voting for? Are you voting for a prime minister who basically takes the mick out of you and will spend your money? Are you voting for the parties who have dual citizenship in other countries so that when the ship has sailed on Brexit, they're just going to run off to other parts of the world? Are you voting for people that really do not care about your faith, your race, your gender, nothing? They have no interest in you as a human. Are you voting for the party who went, I don't know, let's distract the British people by killing them off and filling up the NHS? Like, what exactly are you voting for when you vote for the Conservative Party? What do you think you're getting out of it? I just, beggars belief.
yeah.
So, moving swiftly on. Why talk about these stories? Well, we're talking about these stories on the backdrop of a very simple question. Is it that forgiveness and second chances go hand in hand? When somebody says sorry, are you bound to give them a second chance? And we're going to look at the case of Dr. Bennett Robinson. Many of you will remember before Christmas we had done a Darkside on this particular topic, or had mentioned him in the Darkside before. So we're going to give you just a quick run through of the events, because there has been something new since the last time we did this. And it brings up this question of whether, when we have leaders like Boris Johnson, like Dominic Raab, like others that we've mentioned this evening, should we allow them to have second chances when they say sorry? So here we go. Dr. Bennett Robinson was a pastor in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and on November 13th, he gave his famous sermon, which included the line that dare I say, the best person to rape fellas is your wife speech. That came to the attention of the leadership a week and a half later, and on November 22nd, there was an apology issued through the Greater New York Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. It was issued through them, but it wasn't from, it was said to be from him, but it was through them. Okay, so they published it, he did not. And on November 24th, basically 10 days after the incident in question, Pastor Dr. Bennett Robinson resigns. Well, we would think that the case is all over and that the resignation has sealed it all off, and it's nice. But unfortunately, on January the 11th, the North Jamaican Conference, in a program called Journey of Faith, aired on the 8th of January 2022 with the NJC, the North Jamaican Conference president, Carl Archer, has an interview with Dr. Burnett Robinson. And so begins the saga again. This time, the viewers of this show will be, you can find this information freely out there. He begins, it's a weird interview. So President Carl Archer goes through this whole process of saying, you know, you're a mighty man of God. You've done so many great things. I've been led. So many people have been led mightily by you, and mighty, 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 mighty man of God. Okay. And then he says, but you know, we saw you. Some people will say, we saw what you said, and this seems so out of character for you. So Dr. Burnett Robinson goes on to gaslight. So the first thing he does is say, well, no one saw me say that. It didn't happen. I would never say something like that. Well, we all saw it. We all saw the video, so we don't know how you can say we would never see something like that. He then says that there is a gang of 5 women who are out to get him. He throws the Adventist for social justice in there, the Me Too movement. He says that these women are malicious and that they're being pawns of Satan. And he says, he gaslights quite a lot, I have to say, in that interview. And then he says the right thing. I believe that we should, no is no. When a woman says no, if she's married, she's single, she's whatever, she says no, her no is to be respected. Rape is rape. That is the end of the matter as far as he's concerned. And he continues to call these women pawns of Satan. He then goes on to say, well, he had planned to retire that year, and it was his intention to retire. And so he retired on the 31st of the 12th, and he is happy to volunteer wherever he is asked to be. This on the back of course, the information coming out that there was an injunction against him in 2011 in Florida before he was moved to the Greater New York Conference. The injunction was based on the idea that it had to be a family member, it had to be a repeat abuse, and it was extended once and then finally dropped when he was being moved. That is the facts as we have them in front of us. The question on the table is, when someone says sorry, do we just give them a second chance if they're a leader? You know, Boris Johnson's had multiple second chances. I don't know, Dominic Raab is still on like 1 million second chances considering his behavior. Tucker Carlson's still going strong. The police in the Netherlands are seeking to give people second chances. What do we think?
Listen, I am not Jamaican. I don't speak patois, so I'll do my best. Bundy man. Yeah? I just put it out there like that. Bun him like an old tire wheel. Listen, I ain't got no time for this, and I have no time or respect for the people that can give him a platform to do this. Right? So yeah, I'm calling out the president of the Jamaica Conference. I don't know his name. I believe it's Archer. That is your name?
Yes, President Carl Archer.
There you go. So I'm calling out Carl Archer for this foolishness, for giving the man a platform to gaslight, to lie, because it's only a further form of abuse. You're telling people that what they saw, what they heard, and what they witnessed was not real. You know, so in this television interview, or this program, Archer says that, let me get this quote correct: "Your ministry has really been a blessing so far, and I am confident it will continue to be a blessing." To whom? Rapists? Because who's his ministry a blessing to? Liars? Abusers? You know? So I'm calling out Archer on this. I'm calling out the Jamaican Conference on this. However, I'm not just leaving it at Jamaican Conference. I'm calling out whoever his previous employer was in the States that allowed him to resign. That's first of all, you allowed him to resign, but even before that, you hired him with the allegation of abuse against him. And here's the reality of the way that church politics often works. You need to get rid of a problem in one location, you move it to the next, right? So where he was in Florida, where this the injunction, the protection injunction was taken out against him, you need to get him out of there. So you go and you call your friend that you know up in another district and say, look, we got this problem. Can you help us with it? You'll never should have taken him in the first place with that allegation hanging over his head, right? But after you did, and he went and said what he said, it should have been fired, done, over, finished. Right?
Well,
so
you see.
I'm calling out that. Thirdly, I'm calling out the Florida conference because you had the allegation hanging over the man's head and never allowed a thorough investigation to take place. So you were negligent at best in allowing a potential abuser to go unchecked. This has just been a myriad of failures. And I'm being kind and generous by calling it failures, because when you have one problem here, another problem here, and the same problem repeated there, that's not really a failure. That's a systemic issue. That's a systematic issue.
Yeah. Well, I think when I look at this, I think there's a number of things that, you know, we wanted to talk about this on the backdrop of this idea is, can you say sorry and, you know, all is forgiven in terms of this? And I think what's been interesting is when the initial apology was issued through the Greater New York Conference on November 22nd, there were many people who questioned it. Many people online were like, hold on, wait a minute, writing letters to, writing the news articles, asking the questions, petitions were put forward, all sorts of things were to put in place something to say, there's something wrong with this apology. We really question if this man is really apologizing. And so to me, it's kind of strange because, you know, as the North Jamaican Conference president, if you know this man, let's say, and you think, well, okay, he's obviously issued an apology. I feel like I've known this man since I was a teenager, which is what I think I believe he says. And I've known this man since I was a child. I would like to hear what he has to say, give him the opportunity to really apologize in person. What I found really...
Protege.
Say that again?
He was his protege. I'm not saying in what, I'm just saying he was his protege.
As I understood from the interview, they have known each other. The man was there was some pastoral connection when he was a young person.
I'm sure there was.
I know I can't speak to anything. You go watch the interview for yourself, folks. You can go watch that for yourself. But what I found interesting is there was a point in the interview which really struck me, which is the president says to him, you know, we all saw the video. People watching this will have seen the video. They would have heard what you said, and they would like you to answer to that case. And he says, I didn't say it. I was like, I was waiting for the president to go, okay, come now, brother. Come. No, let's not be silly now, because we all saw it. You know, let's call out this gaslighting moment and let's name this and let's stop that right there. Don't do that, because that's not going to do you any favors. Because what I find really interesting is, of course, he says the right thing next. After he says, you didn't hear me say that, he then goes on to say, you know, rape is always wrong. No means no, fellas. You need to listen. Consent is important. And he says that outright. But the fact that you're trying to say that you didn't say the other thing just completely nullifies the good thing that you're saying. Like, for me, that was a frustrating moment, because I felt like, as the president, as a person who's leading other male pastors, who is in a position of authority in a quite patriarchal system, you had the perfect opportunity to stop someone from saying the lie and saying, hold on, stop, I saw you.
Right.
Don't try and pretend, because I saw you. Say it.
I think we need to look at this within the context. I wouldn't have expected that question to be asked. And the reason for that is that when you look at the pattern of behaviors, he's an abuser. And then when you look at his refusal to issue a public apology, his claim that it was his desire to resign, that he orchestrated everything, that he did everything. And then despite the video evidence on contrary, he says he didn't say it. This guy's a narcissist, right? So you have to look at the fact that who did he go into an interview with? Somebody that was younger than him, that he mentored and had all of these things. So there's a real power dynamic and imbalance here. Although one is the president, he's not the one with the power in that interview.
No.
Right?
That's really sad. It's really sad.
You have to look at what's going on at play here. I would expect the president to push back because Burnett knew exactly who was interviewing him. He knew that he held the power within that dynamic.
Yeah, respect your elders. Well, you know, I read a really beautiful, for those of you who know Patois, this was really great, but the Jamaican Gleaner wrote a great piece on the whole thing and talked about, she said it in some very colorful Patois language, but she said, you know, this backward church, this mess thing that them have a go on in the Seventh-day Adventist church. But one of the things that struck me is that it was in the major newspaper because the Seventh-day Adventists in Jamaica are huge. It's a massive denomination there. It's a popular denomination. The president, I think, is Seventh-day Adventist.
Prime Minister,
thank you.
And he actually went to a camp meeting in the UK once, and there was a whole palaver about that because diplomatic protocols weren't followed and all sorts of stuff like that.
Oh, the joy of having him there. You know, and there are relatives of his that I know in the UK who are very happy that they have a Seventh-day Adventist Prime Minister, so on and so forth. But there are a lot of people who have a dissatisfaction. What was quite interesting was to go down the rabbit hole of seeing, well, how is it that the North, I'm going to keep saying it's the North Jamaican Conference because I don't want the South Jamaican Conference to come for me, but it's the North Jamaican Conference president was able to have this situation happen and have the backing of the people. What is happening on the island? So I do not live in Jamaica, and so I had to do a bit of reading to kind of look it up. And what's interesting is there's been a lot of controversy, particularly over the last couple of years, with the whole corona situation. And their secretary is a COVID denier, it seems, and is up in arms because he's refusing COVID mandates. There's a clash between him and the president. Between the COVID rules and how to enact the COVID rules amongst the membership. The membership are biting back. There's a lot of challenges that the island is going through. Set to that backdrop of this kind of contentious situation where your membership are really having all of these different struggles, steps in this moment in this program, you know, called Journey of Faith, which I found very ironic that that's what you would interview him on. Is this interview done? And it, you know, it beggars belief that with all that you've got going on, this was the way you thought to go. It just is quite astounding that this continues to be the pattern of behavior of leaders. Like this man, Dr. Burnett, was a leader. Dr. Burnett Robinson was a leader in his own right, in his church, and he behaved in a way that brought his whole house of cards down. That's his behavior. But then another leader does exactly the same behavior. Your stuff, your house isn't in order, things are a mess, you're having these conflict situations, you're really going through difficult challenges, and you bring in and do this ill-advised at best and downright out of order, you know, at worst, interview. Because why would you do that? This is not helpful to to your people. This is not going to further conversations of women's rights on your island. This is not going to help the women of your island. Why would you allow this man to have a platform? Why would you even, he don't work no more. You don't have to have him on. Why would you do this? But the church keeps doing this over and over. But I can't even say it's just the church when we see the men I just spoke about at the beginning. Like, it's a pattern of behavior.
Yeah, look, here's the thing. You know, the question is forgiveness versus second chances. Look, when Burnett Robinson resigned and he was employed by the Greater New York Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, he resigned. So essentially, he got his pension.
Yeah.
Right. And I find it hard to believe that no stipulations were put on his resignation and that he could not talk bad about the church in this, because he did a really evil thing in that he resigns, takes his pension, goes off elsewhere, and then accuses the Greater New York Conference of panicking and pandering.
Yes.
Right? And so here's the thing.
Really?
We need to have this conversation about forgiveness versus second chances. Now, here's the thing. Do I believe he should be forgiven?
If he's sorry.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. Forgiveness is often said it's not about the other person. It's about you and being able to let go of things.
Yes, but this is in a slightly different context. So, of course, for the people that he was injuring, the people who dealt with his violence against them, for the people who were his church members, I understand that. But I personally don't have any relationship with this human. I don't know you other than in the professional capacity in which you bring my whole profession into disrepute.
Right.
Like, that's, so can I forgive you? Yes, in a global kind of ethereal way, absolutely. But I have different questions of you that need to be asked. You ain't sorry.
And I think, you know, perhaps there's a middle ground in between the two choices of second chances and forgiveness, and that's perhaps absolution. So often people that say sorry are looking for absolution, right? They're looking to be free of the responsibility or the consequences that comes with their actions. So when it comes to a question of forgiveness, yes, you know, I think if we go along with the concept that forgiveness is more to do for the person who has been injured to be able to let go of that hurt, then yes, we forgive him because it's absolutely nothing to do with him.
Yeah, has everything
do we
to do
absolve
with my
him?
relationship with
No.
God. Right.
Right. And I think that's perhaps the point that we need to talk about. We don't absolve him. And considering this is beyond his second chance, because he had the issue down in Florida, resignation should never have been an option. We're now beyond second chances.
Well, to me, I think it's this idea of second chances. I remember when at the time we were having this discussion, and I remember one of the things that you said really clearly to me was, he's an older gentleman. He's not going to be able to find work again. It's really important that as a Christian organization that we actually do the thing that we're supposed to and take care of our people, even if they have fallen in sin, that we ensure that in some ways they are still able to live after they've done this. And I remember you really hammering this home to me, and I was like, because I was like, bring the whole cow. I was not merciful, and you were just like, no, Tabitha, it's really important that we have these opportunities, that people understand that as a Christian organization, particularly, that our values. And I was like, you know what, you're absolutely 100% right, completely agree with you. We need to always remember that looking after people is still our greatest mandate. When I heard him say, he orchestrated his own resignation, basically, because that's what he had planned to do from the beginning. And so this freed him to be able to do his resignation, keep his pension, and go wherever the Lord so shall choose, and whoever calls him, and continue his ministry. I mean, Esteem, I think, actually left my ears, because it was this conflict between, well, you're not actually taking responsibility for your actions, and you're still trying to gain people's trust and still be in positions of power, when you yourself need to go on a learning journey and go and deal with this issue properly. Because his point about rape is obviously, it's a non-starter. We're not even going to we don't even need to entertain a discussion as to whether what he said was wrong or whatever. But the theology that fuels that point, the theology that he has that fuels the point that got him there, you need to deal with that. The idea that women are, because the whole sermon, there was a longer sermon, and it was about women being property. You know, your body is not yours. You had to give yourself over to your husband. You know, you need to do this for your man, blah, 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 blah. That whole rhetoric that ended with that statement, and dare I say, just gave clarity to that whole kind of rhetoric that we have in the church. You need to go deal with that. You need to take a humble step and go deal with that. You don't need to be in trying to keep power, trying to be, you know, I'm the Lord's anointed and I'm doing. No, you're not. Go deal with your mess.
Right.
Go deal with your house.
But and see, I think this is part of a bigger picture. So yes, when we had the conversation, and I said, look, you know, he's an older gentleman. He needs to be taken care of. This was before I had the knowledge about this allegation in Florida.
Yes. Well,
right? Because here's the thing, you know, at that point, he should have been fired. I still stand by that. He should have been fired from the Greater New York Conference after he made this statement that he did. As I said, once again, you can work out the terms of whatever severance that you want after that. And that can be done quietly. That doesn't need to be public knowledge. You can make sure he's not destitute and on the streets, right? But you should never have allowed him to resign, because that leaves him in good standing.
Yeah.
He should have been fired, and that should have been a matter of record.
Yeah.
But this question goes, so we're talking about Burnett, but I think the question goes, you know, deeper than that, because we've been talking about Boris Johnson.
Yeah.
And the amount of times. So this is the second time he has had to apologize to Lizzie. Right?
To the Queen, for those of you who don't know.
Lizzie. So the first time was when he illegally prorogued Parliament. In other words,
yes.
He illegally closed Parliament.
Yes.
Right? He had to apologize for that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Right?
Now he's apologizing again.
Now he's been having not just one party, but many parties.
Well, what he's apologizing to her for is partying the night before her husband's funeral.
Her husband's funeral, right?
Funeral.
But this is what you have to remember: the nation was in a state of national mourning.
Right. It's a state funeral. It's not just it's not any normal funeral.
And so he has had to apologize for this. And he's going to have to apologize for another thing, because the reality is, the question becomes, okay, so you wanted to forgive him over the proroguing of Parliament. A lot of people said he made mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But this is a pattern of behavior now. He's now having to apologize again. What are you going to say? Everybody makes mistakes. And then the next time he has to apologize, everybody makes mistakes. There has to come a point where you distinguish between forgiving someone, absolving someone, and giving someone a second chance. Because here's the reality: those in leadership are to be held to a higher standard. And those in leadership that make such egregious mistakes like this do not warrant second chances. And I recognize I'm talking to a pastor here. So I'm going to present a biblical example of this. And the biblical example of this that I'm going to present to you is Moses.
Okay.
Right? So Moses strikes the rock.
In anger.
Right? In anger, when he was told to do something else.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He has to recognize now that he has done something wrong that he shouldn't have done.
Mm-hmm.
Does God forgive him? Well, the
Yes.
Bible records the fact that Moses goes to heaven.
Mm-hmm.
But Moses is not given a second chance here because he is told he will not enter the promised land.
Mm-hmm.
He was meant to lead the people into the promised land. He was not absolved of what he had done,
Mm-hmm.
and he never got a second chance. But he was forgiven. And I think that we as people, especially as Christians, need to be able to distinguish between these things. Otherwise, we end up excusing poor behavior from our leadership under the guise of Christianity. And all that does is allow us to be abused even further. All it does is foster an environment in which abusers feel safe and secure. Because what will they say? Well, the Bible says to forgive 70 times 7. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Yeah, all have sinned, and I'll forgive you. I will forgive you. But I'm not going to trust you in a position of responsibility again. I'm not going to trust you in a position of leadership again. And I think it's pretty disingenuous of us to take this approach towards our leadership and those in authority when you know full well that the majority of us find out that there is a Prince Andrew in our congregation, are not giving them the opportunity to carry on with their abuse.
Listen, so I like the story you gave. So I want to just add a couple of things, just a little bit of color and embellishment, just to help us out a little bit with the conversation. Because I think sometimes people hear what you're saying and then they may interpret it in a different way. So I just want to just ask a few questions for clarity's sake. So I think that the story that you use from the biblical narrative is really important because it doesn't say that up until that point, Moses had never sinned. Moses was completely perfect and had never done anything wrong up until that point. That was the first wrongdoing, and then voila,
No, but
out.
Moses was a murderer. We know he had sinned. We know
but
he had
this is my
sinned.
point. For people who really like to take things out of context, there's a real context to this story. You know, in his youth, he was a murderer. He has real trouble when he's leading the people. There comes a point when he has real difficulties and he has to go to his father-in-law. And his father-in-law's like, what are you doing? You're making mistake after mistake. Stop this. You need to actually assign people to help you. You need to stop trying to do it all yourself. You're wearing yourself out. So he's not a perfect leader. What he does in this moment is he does something that brings the whole people and leads them in a direction against God that would be wrong. And this is the point that needs to be made. In moments when we as leaders forfeit our right to lead by leading people down the entirely wrong path, be it abusing them, endorsing abuse of people, any of those sorts of things, you're going to have to take this one on and go sit down and find yourself another job. Sadly, that's the reality of the case. And I say that as humbly as I possibly can because I'm a pastor. I know how difficult this work is. I know how challenging it is to work with people, how frustrating the job can be, how in love with my work I can be, how wonderful and fulfilling and great and overwhelming and distressing and human I am in the middle of it all. But the reality is, if you're endorsing violence and abuse, if you are an abuser, these are not things that you can come back from and stand in front of people and be like, cha-ching, you know, let's do this, it'll be fine. That's not something you can come back from in that way. There are other jobs you can do. You just can't lead the people anymore. And I think that if you're in a position of being a shepherd, which is often what a pastoral role is likened to, you're a shepherd. If you can't keep the sheep safe, if the sheep are in danger from you, forget the wolves, or if you're just letting the wolves in the gate constantly, you shouldn't be a shepherd. That sadly is the reality of what we're dealing with. And then people say, well, there's no perfect people, but that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about you having to live up to a perfect standard of what a human being is and putting stress on your shoulders and making yourself suicidal because you can't live up to it. What we're saying is, don't intentionally harm your congregation. Don't intentionally harm people. Don't do that. Don't be abusive. And if you can't not be abusive, then this isn't for you. That's the reality. It's just not for you. That was the question at stake for Moses. His anger had gotten the best of him as a young person. He committed murder. His anger gets the better of him again. And God says, no, listen, we need to... No, you are not crossing over. You can stand on the rock with me. I go stand with you. I go take you up to heaven, but you are not crossing into the land. I don't want that on my conscience. That's not how I want my people to go. We all know the children of Israel struggle, but that's not what he wanted for his leadership. The same is true of David. The same is true of Solomon. The same is true of Samson. The same is true of a lot of the men in the biblical narrative, where they're told by God, you are blessed, you're da-da-da-da. And then it gets to a point where God says, no more, to here and no further. So I hope people understand that it's not about reaching this unnatural perfection state as a leader and being able to control every impulse, every habit, and never do anything wrong. It's really about, are you keeping your congregation safe? When instances of abuse come to you, when there are times when you have to make hard decisions for the safety of your people, can you make those decisions for the safety of your people? Can you control yourself and your own urges enough that you are not harmful to your people? Come on. If you can't do that, then really we're
Right.
not having this discussion.
Listen, just to echo what you said, I'm not speaking of perfection from leadership.
No.
I'm not expecting you to make or to get every decision right or that I should agree with it. But there are some things that you can do and some decisions you can make that are so egregious that you just need to accept. You need to remove yourself from that position. And I know people will be here because I know that quite a few people that do watch the program are of a religious persuasion, will be wanting to say, what about Jesus and forgiveness and redemption? Well, here's the thing, redemption doesn't apply here because redemption is something that God gives us. That's not something we can earn or work for or do anything about. Redemption is a gift that we choose to accept or not.
Yeah.
Right? So it has nothing to do with leadership and giving leaders second chances.
No.
Absolutely nothing. So I just want to be clear on that and to clear up, because I know there will be people out there that will be trying to apply a salvific issue or a salvific element to something that it's not applicable to.
Well, I think it's really sad that people cannot see the difference between being held accountable in this lifetime, being held responsible for your actions, having consequences for your actions with your soul salvation. Like, you being saved by God is a matter for you and God, and it's a matter for God. He's the giver of salvation. He's the giver of grace. He's the one who is merciful. He is the one that extends that. The Bible records in Exodus that God describes himself as being the faithful, loyal, loving forgiver of people unto the, as much as it says he will visit the iniquities, it says that he will also be faithful unto the third and fourth generations. That's who God is. And that is an issue with you and God. In terms of the systems within which we live here on earth, there are things that you need to deal with. There are consequences you need to have. This is why people don't want pedophiles in posts in children's ministry. I don't that's not something that should ever happen. This is why police officers should be held to account. And it's why pastors should be held to account for their actions. And it is tough. It's not an easy thing because pastors are under scrutiny all the time, contrary to the mega pastors that we have out there that live their own separate life. The rest of us, mere mortals, who are the majority of the pastoral working force, work within small congregations across the globe, doing a thankless task for hardly any money. And that's the reality of a pastor's life across every culture, across every denomination. You're under pressure. But here's the thing. That pressure shouldn't be to work out how to get away with abusing the people in your congregation or the people that attend your church. That's not the pressure you should be under. If that's something that you're experiencing, go get help and leave your profession immediately. Like, it's not for you. You should, if you have reports of abusive people, please go to the police. Do not try and resolve these things with in-house anything. This is not what we should be doing. We need to hold that higher standard and ensure that people are safe when they're at their most vulnerable. People are vulnerable when they come to church because they believe with all of their heart that everyone who's there are good and loving people, when everyone that's there is the same as them, the same messed up sinner. So they're really vulnerable when they're in a church setting. And it then means that those of us that are elders, pastors, priests, leaders, have got to work harder and do better when it comes to issues of safety, security, abuse, etc.
Right. So there's that. I also want to say that I don't believe that there is no way back for leaders that have made mistakes. But I believe that you need to take the time to step away from that position. Have the humility to step away from that position. Have the humility to go and learn and educate yourself. Be reflective of the mistake that you made. Put in the work that is necessary before you return or attempt to return to a leadership position. So even in the case of Burnett Robinson, he's made the mistake, and I'm being really polite in saying mistake. Whatever his actions were that led to a person having to take out a protection injunction against him in Florida, right? I don't know what that was, but it's as a result of violence. That's the only grounds on which these orders, repeated violence, and that's the only grounds on which these orders are granted.
Right.
You have an anger issue. I would have had more respect for you had you admitted that, stepped back from the position, sought help, put in the work, and then after doing so, said, I would like to try and make a return to this. I have more time and space for people that will do that than for people that will just say, no, it wasn't me, didn't do it, and just continue on repeating that pattern. And I believe that actually leaders that can actually do that process of self-reflection make better leaders in the long run, not just in making better choices, but I believe they are more empathetic leaders. You know,
well, often because they make the best advocates, those people who've been in the situation. And we know this, there are a lot of people who work within the Christian field in various capacities, but some of them literally reformed their life. And there are many stories of people who turn on to be leaders in the future, but they reform their life from the abusive way that they were going, and they find redemption, and they go down the journey of really working on themselves and dealing with it. And that becomes their ministry. It becomes their ministry to share with others that it's possible to come back from the worst depths of whatever abusive situation you found yourself in. And there are so many amazing stories of people, lives that have been lived, that have helped people, that have really pushed the envelope on these discussions, and that work within the communities that they do. So I can really understand the point that you're making from that perspective, because when I look at some of those stories and I think of people that are ex-gang members who were heavily into violent behaviors, who were heavily abusive, who had quite misogynistic ideas, who really went down a really dark route, and then their lives turned around because of Jesus, and then they maybe made one or two mistakes as they were trying to figure it out for themselves. Some of them make the best advocates to people from their own community, because they're saying, actually, it's possible to be redeemed. It's possible to go on the journey. It's possible to, sorry, I have to plug in my laptop. It's possible to actually, where's this plug gone? It's possible to actually be redeemed, and for God to work with you, and for you to go through the system to get the help that's necessary. And I think that, you know, it is an opportunity, like you say. I mean, there are some crimes that I think you really just don't come back from. Just deal with your issues, go find another job, and be happy with doing whatever you're doing. But I can understand the point that you're making about being a reflective leader and learning. You know, I've had that laid at my door as a pastor, you know, that people haven't agreed with your decision or don't like the way that you've behaved. And they're like, reflect on it, pastor. please do better in the future. So you get those things laid at your door. And it is important that we take those opportunities seriously. I will say it's never been on anything like this. It's just somebody not liked a decision I've made, which is very different than, of course, this particular scenario. There was one other aspect I wanted to talk about before we wrap up, and I don't know whether you were going to get to it, which is this idea of the word sorry. Will you come into that?
Go for it.
Well, one of the things that strikes me is that, you know, there was a statement of apology made through the Greater New York Conference. There's statements of apology made by Boris Johnson. There's statements of apologies that get made all the time. And people just say, oh, I'm sorry. And then they expect everything to go back together. Like everything goes back to normal after they say this like magical word, and then it all goes back to normal. And I just wanted to emphasize the fact that I think we really need to do some work in understanding, I guess, how to apologize, but also teaching the younger generations what sorry actually means, because I think this is like a leftover from the playground, it feels like. So, of course, when we as parents teach our children how to apologize, we always have a few components to it. You need to understand who you're apologizing to, what you're apologizing for, and how you're going to fix your behavior. Like, it's not just say sorry and then it's all good. Who are you talking to? So actually name the person. What are you saying you're sorry for? And, you know, only say sorry if you actually mean it. Like, you need to actually understand and process what you're saying. Have you had the time to process that? Do you have questions? Do you understand why what you did was wrong? And we ask those questions. But what often I see is, let's say two kids are having a disagreement, brother, sister, two kids at playground, doesn't really matter. One of them, let's say, hits the other one and immediately say, sorry, that was naughty. And so the child will say, sorry, and then all is forgiven and off the kid runs. The problem with that approach is, why did the child say they were sorry? What does sorry mean to the child? It doesn't mean anything. It means a get out of jail free card. It has no value and meaning. It doesn't actually, all you're saying is if you say this magical word, you can get out of anything. And you're seeing that played out with adults. Like Boris Johnson is doing the very same thing. Sorry. And then goes on with ridiculous behavior. Sorry. Goes on with same said ridiculous behavior. Dr. Burnett issued an apology through the Greater New York Conference, said sorry, goes on to say he doesn't even have anything to say sorry for because he didn't say anything. He didn't say it. So what are you saying sorry for then? What does sorry actually mean?
But I think this goes back to the point, or at least links to the point that I made about absolution. People that say sorry are looking for absolution. And sorry is that magical word on the playground where if I say sorry, I'm absolved from consequences. I just say sorry, I get my absolution, I move on and do whatever else I want to do. And I think, as you say, that's just being played out in adults. And I think we need to look at the conditioning that has taken place where we have taken sorry to be that magic phrase for absolution. And it's like dealing with a little child who says, please. And when you say no, they're like, but I said please.
But I don't
Well, just
believe
because you
that's
said
my-
please doesn't mean you're going to get it.
I had
And
this
what
very conversation with a young lady recently.
and what you're dealing with is adults that say sorry and then
Hmm.
expect absolution for their
Hmm.
actions,
Hmm.
but you're equally dealing with adults that are used to giving that absolution when they
Yeah,
hear sorry.
yeah. Yeah, and I think that that to me is worrying, because I think, when we take that theology, that ideology that we have in our head, and then we read scripture. So now I'm going to bring back in the theological point again. We apply the thing that we have in our head, this idea that I can just say sorry and then it's all forgiven. And then we read Jesus's words and we go, well, see, that's what he meant. He said 70 times 7. Well, if you look at the longer context of what Jesus is talking about, he didn't mean just keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting someone else to forgive you. What he was talking about is a communal understanding of what it means to live in relationship and what it means to be a Christian in relationship to other people. When I'm living with other people, I am going to have to be the person that frees myself from being hateful and angry and ready to kill everybody at a moment's notice, because these people are not sorry, they're not repentant, they're not going to change unless they meet Jesus. I need to come into a relationship with Jesus and free myself from that unending kind of cycle of hate that you can get into. So I think it's really important that when you look at this ideology of how to apologize, and I know that this has changed, and people, I even find it quite difficult to keep up with what a proper apology looks like. There's people that say it's not just this, it's not just this, you have to add this and you have to add that, and if you don't say it like this, then you don't really mean you're sorry. Instead of looking at the hoops that in terms of what we say, actually looking at what does it mean to say sorry, and just don't say it if you don't mean it. Like, you talked about the child example, but we've had situations where we've had our children and they have said sorry for something. We're like, you don't mean that. Like, you just trying to get out of whatever trouble, whatever consequence for your action. The consequence still stands. And the child looks at you, but I said sorry. And I'm like, well, yes, I'm glad you said sorry. I'm really happy that you know you shouldn't have done it, but the consequence still stands for your situation. I'm not changing the consequence because you said sorry. That is the consequence of your action, and it still stands. And I might stand with you, but guess what? Sorry isn't going to eradicate your behavior. And I think that as adults, we need to understand that we need to move beyond a position where sorry is a magical phrase, which we just say to get out of anything. And we don't want to do anything that takes time and hard work. I know that we're a Twitter generation and Instagram, one picture, 144 characters. But I think we need to realize that things take time, they take efforts, and it takes a relationship. You can't just magically say sorry in 10 seconds and that's going to eradicate all the things that you've done. You need to actually put the work in and do the work that's happening, that needs to be done. That takes time.
Yeah. Look, the you touched on this forgiveness of 70 times 7. And that story leads into the story of the unforgiving servant. And the point of that story is about mercy and compassion for one another, right? But what happens at the end of the story when somebody doesn't show the mercy and compassion that was shown to them,
That's right, Angel.
right? You're held responsible for your actions,
Yeah.
and so you have to understand that there's not the absolution here. It's about saying, let me have empathy, let me have mercy.
Mm.
What can people
Mm.
will show me mercy. I want mercy to be shown to me. I should show it to others, you know. And when you don't, what are the consequences of that? Well, here's the thing. Mercy was shown to Boris Johnson the first time he had to apologize to the Queen and didn't resign.
We're on time.
Mercy was shown to Burnett Robinson down in Florida when he had that allegation against him, right? And here's the thing, mercy was shown when he was allowed to resign, right? But now let's put this into the context of the unforgiving servant. How did he demonize the women in his congregation when
Oh
he went
no.
onto this program?
Oh no.
Where are the consequences for that? If you want to take the biblical concept of being forgiven 70 times 7, and Burnett Robinson thinks he was wronged and was shown the mercy, he did the wrong, was shown the mercy of being allowed to resign and keep his pension, then goes around and then does this to the members of his congregation, who's coming to throw him in jail?
Well now. Well now. Well now. Well now. Yeah, I mean, I know we've gone over time today, but I think it warranted. We could go on a lot longer on the actual conversation of forgiveness and what is forgiveness. But I think it really warranted having the full conversation just because it paints a bigger picture. You know, sometimes people are very hard on Christians, particularly in Western cultures, but, you know, on religious figures generally. They can be really hard and say, look at you, terrible people. You live like this awful, look how abusive you guys are, and then say, look at the rest of us, we're great. And it's like, well, look at your leaders too. It's a human condition. It's not just that one particular set of people are suffering from this. It really is a human condition. We saw that in the political stories we gave at the beginning, the repetitive nature of which you had the story against the Muslim woman, but it's not the first story. That's just a repeated behavior. They wanted her to come out in defense of them because somebody else within the party was telling them that they were being Islamophobic, particularly against the female Muslims within their party. Repetitive behavior. You see it with Boris Johnson. He's apologizing to the Queen for the second time, but he's apologizing to the British people for the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. I've lost track of how many apologies he's issued to the British people. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't aware. Oh, I'm sorry, we didn't mean it. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not 20,000. Oh, I'm sorry, we didn't get Brexit done. Oh, I'm sorry, Brexit's done. Oh, whatever rubbish apologies he gives out for whatever reason. But this idea that, the leadership is tough and it's hard. It's not easy. It's not for the faint-hearted, that's for sure. But we shouldn't be enabling bad leaders. But also the idea that people, when they make these grave mistakes, which are detrimental to other people, which are detrimental to countries, congregations, local churches, small numbers of people, whoever it is that you lead, when that happens, it's really important that you understand that sorry is not a get out of free jail card. We see this in the trials that we have with those few police officers that get put on trial and they say sorry and the family say we forgive you, and then the judge then says, well, since they're forgiven, we're just going to give them a free pass and they don't have to go to jail. And it's like, that's not what forgiveness means. There needs to be consequences. They took a person's life, there's still a consequence to that, and there needs to be a consequence because you guys don't hold them accountable often enough and then they go on and do more. This is the nature of the tension between second chances and forgiveness. There has to be a journey. There has to be this lessons learned. There has to be improvement before you can get to the argument that there are second chances.
Are you waiting for a response from me? I don't understand.
We're just wrapping up. So you've got a word now. I've said said my words.
Look,
I'm done.
Look, okay, cool. Well, I'm just gonna say, yeah. Look, leadership's gonna be hard because you've got people like me sitting in congregations or who are voters or who, whatever part of the community I'm in, and I'm not a leader within. You got people like me sitting there. And you know what? If you're a good leader, you should appreciate it because you have people to hold you accountable. Right? And so I'm always cautious of leaders that don't wish to be held accountable. Not to agree with me, but actually, when questioned, do you have a reason for this? What is your reason?
Yeah. Yeah. So that should let everybody know how accountable my life is, right? I'm not getting away with anything. It's not gonna happen. Oh, joy. So there you go. If you need me to be held more accountable, just speak to Mr. Storm over here. It keeps me in check. Hence why we do the dark side together. Oh, well, that is another dark side done. We're so thankful for all of you that have watched this and that keep up with the show. Please continue to support our ministry and to support the mission of the dark side to educate people on the dark side of life, on anti-racism, etc., etc., etc.
Just before we wrap up, in the comments, Dana Sterling has said, "Why is Tucker looking at a cartoon character like that?" Well, Dana, let me ask you a question.
Oh.
Would you look at Tucker Carlson like that? And then maybe you'll know why he's looking at an animated character in the way he does.
We get to end on the giggle again, which is so helpful to me. Thank you for lifting the mood on these difficult dark side topics. Thank you so much for sticking with us. We appreciate you. We appreciate all of your support. Please like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on YouTube particularly. And we will see you next week on the dark side when we're going to talk about, I'm not sure what, but maybe you have a suggestion and they could send it in to us and then we'll look at it. We're all about education over here. Right, I'm going to play the outro and then we're done. Yes? Peace out, folks.